Hello, I'm Jeff Carter with Seattle City Club, and joining me today is Sara Kilisky, also of Seattle City Club. Today, as part of our Civic boot camp on racial equity and systemic racism in Seattle, we'll be talking with Marcellus Turner, director of the Seattle Public Library. Welcome, Marcellus, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
So we'll just start kind of in the getting to know you phase. What is your background and how did you get involved in the Seattle Public Library?
Sure. I think involved is an interesting word to use. It was an application process and nationally advertised position, and I was selected amongst several candidates. So that's how I became involved. But I actually applied for the job and was fortunate enough to be chosen. My background is interesting and non-interesting. I am a 32+ year librarian. I started out as have an MLS degree, so I really am a librarian from the University of Tennessee, but I have been working in libraries for quite a few years, both in academic and in public libraries, and also had some experiences in interning in a special library. So have plenty of history with that. And for the record, I started working in libraries in the 4th grade, as in my elementary school. Once you entered 4th grade, all students were required to work in some office within the school. And so I got the library, and I got it for the 4th grade and for the 6th grade. They sent me to the counselor's office or the nursing office for 5th grade. But I have worked in libraries quite some time.
As a quick follow-up, what's your passion for, what's driving you to work in the libraries? What's driving you?
Sure. So that's probably more interesting, but a longer story. So I'll just stick with what is my passion. I think as I've matured in the work that I do, and certainly in the positions that I've attained, such as the director of a library system, the passions that I have are optimizing the work and interest of staff to deliver library services. Every system I've worked in has really, really great staff, and staff who are really creative in their thinking about how we can serve the public, but oftentimes can't do it from the front lines, and they need someone in a higher position to help carry their ideas forward. And I've always liked doing that. And then the second thing that is a passion for mine is pretty much pertinent to your topic today, though I don't speak of it in the same terms. But I challenge the staff here at Seattle Public to become the most socially conscious library in the country, world actually. But so social consciousness in libraries is really one of my true personal passions.
And that kind of follows with the next question. What role does the Seattle Public Library play, and libraries in general, in addressing racial equity and systemic racism, especially in our community here?
Sure. So I'll speak about libraries in general, and I would dare say that this probably transcends over into academic libraries as well. But libraries have a critical role that is at the heart of their core library services, which is to support lifelong learning, to inform, to educate, and to entertain. And we do that through 3 mediums. We do that through the collection of books that we have so that people can learn on their own and become informed on their own. We have reference and information services where they can ask direct questions. Was that comment made on the debate last night true? Our staff can research that for them and make them informed. And then 3, we bring in programming, including authors to speak on subjects. So our role is to inform. And, you know, we're very fortunate that Seattle is a city where social consciousness is a really big issue for just about everyone who lives here. So we have wonderful opportunities to capitalize on any interest that this city might have to support that learning that occurs with that. We can support bringing in an author. We can support programming on that topic. We can buy more books on the subject. Dr. Ibram X. Kende's book, we are buying copies and copies of that book because so many people are wanting to read it. So we have 3 big avenues to support that.
So what are the specific issues you're addressing in Seattle, and how would you compare Seattle, your experience in Seattle, to other communities you've lived in, and like East Coast and Tennessee and such?
Sure. So I think, it's interesting for the city and the reputation that Seattle has as a technology hub and that we're so connected. One of the big challenges for us is a city that is not as technologically connected as we would hope. And so one of the roles that we physically step into is how do we do that? And how do we do that for more of our marginalized communities? And so right now, and especially during this pandemic, the one access point that we did have for the general public was that they could come in and use our computers to live their lives. And now with the pandemic, we're closed to that. So the work becomes, how do we support that? And so we've been trying to support that through hotspots. And everyone's heard of a hotspot, I'm sure, but it's a device that allows you to connect to the internet. And so we actually circulate hotspots. And believe it or not, that is the most circulated item in our collection. On top of every book that we have, hotspots are the most circulated items that we have. And we've also tried to extend that to support schools. We work with Seattle Housing Authority to make some available to kids who do not have technology at home. And we've also tried to do that with our daily readers who are no longer able to come into the library. Daily readers are what we call our insecurely housed and homeless population. And so those who are living in shelters right now, we're providing hotspots at those shelters so that they can connect through their own devices.
Sarah, do you want to ask the next about pandemic?
Yeah, I was going to ask something, but you covered a lot of that. But how have your services changed, and how does that impact the physical space and sense of community?
Sure. Well, as you know, we are guided by the phases that the governor has set up, and libraries are not authorized to reopen to the public until we hit phase 3, and we're not in phase 3 right now. So certainly services and access have been changed or modified. I think this is a point where I would say that we are doing everything we can to make access to the public. So we are certainly increasing our monies that we direct to digital materials so that people can access them. But as you might imagine, that creates a divide that we do not have a community that everyone has technology to access digital materials. So the biggest challenge that we've had during the pandemic is how do we make the 2 million items that are locked in our buildings available to the public? And one of the ways that we're doing that is through curbside service. So we now offer an opportunity for a patron to walk up and ask for an item, and we try to secure it, or we allow them to electronically place an item on hold and we'll make it available to them. It is an appointment type service, so it's not to say that if you walked up today and asked for a book that we would have it available at that location today, but we will try to get it. And I think what it pushes us to do as a staff, and where I talk about one of my pet peeves, is that it pushes us to be creative. At this moment, I don't need innovation, I need creativity. I need someone to think about a different way to deliver something. I don't need them to go out and think of a whole new piece of technology that will allow someone to do it. I need to figure out, how can I get this book from point A to point B? And I need your creative minds thinking about that. And fortunately, we have a public who's helping us think about that too. We get lots of suggestions about how we can make this service available more often. So,
Do you see this extending, like a lot of these different offerings and the ways you've adapted in a post-pandemic world?
I think that convenience and technology will drive our future. And I think that so many people will become, I'll say it in a different way. Before the pandemic, I bet you could say to 3 out of 5 people, do you prefer print or do you prefer electronic? And many would say they prefer print. I think living through these last 6 to 8 months of the pandemic has given a lot of people an opportunity to experience electronic resources. And I imagine that we will find that many are comfortable with them to the point that they may not necessarily wish to resume physical access. I think they may go back to wanting to do electronic resources. It's the same premise as Netflix. Why is Netflix so easy and why do people use it? Because it's convenient. They can request it from home. It's delivered to their home. We haven't mastered that yet, but that's where creativity comes into play. but that's what people want, and I think it's going to continue. There will be people who are ready to come back in the buildings and need some of the services that we provide in the buildings, but there will be many who say, I love this idea of putting 50 books on hold at night and they're showing up in my mailbox the next day.
So going, maybe taking a step back pre-COVID and maybe post-COVID times and looking at all of the different branches that you have, how do you address equity in terms of neighborhoods? So one neighborhood might be more disadvantaged than another one. So how does the library kind of make sure that all kind of branches serve the communities in an equitable way?
Sure. So we know that the equity across the system, the city is not easily distributed or not evenly distributed for that matter. So when we take into consideration a program or service, we really think about how does it impact the parts of our community who may not have easy access to this. I'll give you a case in point. Before the pandemic, and even now we still have it, but the service is not available. But before the pandemic, we have a fax machine in one of our libraries in South Seattle that we don't have in the other libraries because we know that access to fax machines is not as prevalent in some parts of our community. So we really stop to think about any service that we get ready to add and think about what can we do to make that service more accessible, more easily attained than for the other parts of the community. And in some instances, it's a simple matter of distribution of materials. We want to be sure that our print materials get out to those libraries first before they go to the other parts of the city, just because if you did it on a purely equal basis, the books may be requested on hold before anyone in one of our marginalized communities even gets a chance to put the item on hold. So we have to think about every aspect of our work in that way.
Thank you. Now to current issues, the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and of course many others, and the subsequent racial reckoning that's happening now. How has that impacted your services and your staff? Black Lives Matter, et cetera.
Sure. So, you know, I'll say a couple of things. The first one is that we're very fortunate that we have a diverse population to help us serve the needs of our community. That is very good. We are not as reflective as we would like to be of our community, but we are certainly a diverse collection of staff. And so that helps us connect and hear from our staff about some of the concerns that are occurring. But it also makes our staff vulnerable in some of these instances in ways that we have to learn to deal with. Some of our staff who are members of these communities are not necessarily comfortable speaking about it. They are not necessarily comfortable being on the front line. So we have to think about all of that. But they help us think about how our program of service should be delivered, whether they want to be on the front lines or not. Recognizing how this impacts them gives us an opportunity to pause and say, how do we want to approach that? The second thing I'd say is that we're very fortunate that we live in a city where this administration and this city is asking us to reconcile how we operate and what we do as a library, as a city, to respond to these issues. And I think that the library has a wonderful opportunity to help carry those conversations forward. The library has a wonderful opportunity to address issues, to make information available. So the killings were such horrific matters for this country to face. And we are trying to do the best we can. And I think the work that we are doing is progress. If we were not doing anything, I would be very disappointed in the city and in the library system.
Thank you for that and taking the energy to have this conversation with us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, how do you promote wellness and self-care for yourself, your staff, and community?
Well, I can probably do a better job of answering how to help others than for myself, because I don't know that I'm doing the best self-care that I can. I am trying not to feel as harried as I might have been otherwise. The you know, where we were back in March is so different from where we are now. And I've looked at how I've relaxed a bit, if you can call it relaxed. But I do try to take time for myself. I enjoy speaking with a friend and at the end of each day on the other side of the country who is not a librarian, who has no interest in libraries in that way, because then you get a chance to unload without them trying to solve the problem and that type of thing. So that's the self-care that I take. I try to walk, I try to sleep. For our staff, we are trying to give them space to express. This is such a challenging time for everyone. And I think that getting up, going to work, glad to have a job, certainly, but recognizing the stresses that are placed on them, we give them spaces to talk. We ask them how they are coping and share that with everyone, because we're always looking for some tip from the next person to say, oh, I should incorporate that. So we're trying to do that. And then for our general public, we're trying as much as possible to be what they know. Now, we certainly can't be the library that we used to be, but there is a comfort in knowing that their library is there. There is a comfort in knowing that reading will do a lot to soothe some concerns. And so we're just trying to be as familiar. We will never return to the norm, and we will never be the library that we used to be, but we try to be familiar to them. And if we can be familiar, I think that will go a long way.
Yeah, I definitely think the library is a space for self-care and a safe space as well for people. So I really appreciate that, and I want to go back. So what steps can we take to dismantle systemic racism and work towards equity?
Sure. So I am probably the last person to want to answer a question with a cliche, but I just have to say that they sometimes fit, and this might be one of those circumstances where it does fit. Um, I do believe in listening, and I think that is really, really key. I think it is recognizing that everyone's experience is not the same. I'll just give you a quick example. Someone asked me about the George Floyd killing, and I don't know how they expected me to respond, but the first thing I said to them is, I've never seen anyone killed before in my life. I said, I've actually watched it on TV, but in real life, I've never seen anyone killed. So my first recognition and reconciliation is watching someone be killed. That just doesn't happen in everyone's life. And I think they may have thought that was an easy one for me. So I said, I'm a long way from the average person, I would imagine. And so I've got to reconcile that before I can even get to the next thing, because I'm having to address how could humanity not be a part of that whole issue. But I think that listening, recognition of different experiences, I think the opportunity to engage, I think the opportunity to respond and ask with the best of intentions is always good. It sounds very touchy-feely, but I think that does apply in this instance. If you were hoping for some awakening that I was going to provide, I don't know that I have that. I can certainly recognize other things that can be done, but I think where it's going to matter is how we're willing to approach or have that conversation with the person next to us and how we talk about that. I think there are things that you can do depending upon, well, let me say that differently. I think there are other things that can be done to address issues. Voting is certainly one of them, however you wish to vote, but I think that is an option that many people have. I think volunteering is something that people can do, but I do get back to the cliches. I think you have to be willing to listen and talk to that person sitting next to you.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, listening is an aspect of literally all of those things. So it's, yeah, super important. I'm gonna, Jeff ask some questions.
Yep, and kind of related to that, what is your vision for a just and equitable Seattle, and where does the Seattle Public Library system fit in that vision?
Ooh, a just and equitable, you know, it sort of plays into a question. Well, a just and equitable system is one where people have that right to live their lives as they wish to live, and where people have that opportunity to be represented as a person equal to the person next to them. That is a just and equitable society. That doesn't necessarily address how does racism look in that or systemic racism look in that, but that's certainly how a just and equitable system would look for me. The Seattle Public Library is, in as much as we can, be an equalizer, an opportunity to become equal. People need to be informed. People need to have an opportunity to be exposed, and that is what the library can do. The library can expose you to many different thoughts and views. The library can be a vehicle for self-expression. The library can be a vehicle for people to gather around like-minded interests. The library plays that role of being there. You know, we just are there for you. And how people choose to use us is their own decision. We don't question. We say all of the time, we have something to offend everyone. And we take that same approach with how we are here. We have something for everyone. You may not like what we have on this floor, but if you go to the next floor, I'm sure you will find something that we have that meets your needs.
And finally, what would you say is your hope for the future? I know it's a big question.
Well, I think there's two parts to that, and I think you're probably asking on a more higher level than I'm going to respond first. But certainly, I would hope to have our libraries back open and funded in the way that we need them to be, so that we can serve the public in a safe way. Safety is not just about for our staff, but we want our public to be safe, and so that's always a challenge. My hope for the future is that we get to the end goal that we're striving for right now, that all of this work is putting in. I would hate for all of this work to be for naught. Lots of great people are doing great things, small, big, large, interesting. I want that all to have a shared goal of reaching this ideal, but I want it to be for something.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, I hope to see the public libraries open, you know, in the future with post-pandemic, as we kind of handle this, hopefully, and get through
Our
this
fingers
period.
are crossed.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, thank you again. And I want to thank Alaska Airlines, our Civic Bootcamp supporting partner, for helping us in this, putting on this program as well. So take care, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
You do likewise, and thank you so much for inviting me in for the interview.
Sure.
Thank you.